The most dangerous monsters don't hide in dark, abandoned alleys. They sit directly across from you at the dinner table, sipping your expensive wine, and call you Dad. My name is Arthur. I'm 62 years old, widowed, and a man who spent 4 decades turning a single, rusty pickup truck into one of the most successful logistics empires in the Southwest. I always believed that building wealth was the ultimate expression of a father's love. I gave my only son, Marcus, the keys to a kingdom he never had to sweat for. I paid off his hidden debts, funded his lavish lifestyle, and purposely looked the other way when his ambition slowly mutated into toxic arrogance. Before I reveal how the ultimate betrayal unfolded inside the walls of my own home, if you appreciate stories of cold, calculated revenge and psychological justice, hit that subscribe button and like this video. It tells me you're ready to explore the dark truth of human nature. I thought I was raising a capable successor. I didn't realize I was patiently feeding a parasite. On the afternoon of Father's Day, surrounded by 40 guests on my perfectly manicured lawn, his mask finally slipped. Marcus thought he was a hunter closing in on weak, aging prey. But he made one fatal, irreversible miscalculation. He forgot exactly who built the very house he was trying to steal. The afternoon sun bathed my estate in a warm golden glow. The air smelled of expensive cigars and catered barbecue. Friends, business partners, and family were gathered on the terrace to celebrate Father's Day. I sat quietly at the head of the long table, sipping iced tea, when Marcus tapped his crystal wine glass with a silver fork. The cheerful chatter immediately died down. To my father, Marcus began, his voice oozing with a practiced, theatrical sorrow, a man who built an incredible empire. But as we've all noticed lately, time catches up with even the best of us. He paused, looking around at the distinguished guests with a feigned tragic smile. With his recent confusion and his memory slipping a little more each day, it falls on me to carry his heavy burden, to step up and protect him from himself. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the patio. My youngest granddaughter stopped playing on the grass. The guests exchanged uncomfortable, pitying glances. Marcus wasn't just insulting me, he was planting a poisonous seed. He was publicly establishing a narrative that I was losing my mind. He waited for me to explode, to shout and prove him, right, to look exactly like the erratic, unstable old man he was painting me to be. Instead, I simply stood up. I smoothed the crease of my linen trousers, offered him a chillingly polite smile, and said, "A heavy burden, indeed. Let me lighten it for you." I left my glass untouched, walked past the stunned crowd, and grabbed a set of keys resting on the entryway console. They belonged to the pristine black Porsche 911 parked in the circular driveway, a retirement gift I had bought for myself, though Marcus routinely bragged at his country club that it was his. I slid into the leather driver's seat, ignited the roaring engine, and left the party in my rearview mirror. 10 minutes later, while cruising down the highway, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed "Sit Police Department. Mr. Arthur, we've received a stolen vehicle report for a black Porsche," a calm officer stated. "The caller, your son Marcus, claims you took his car in a state of severe mental disorientation." I didn't panic. But before I could calmly answer the officer, my phone buzzed against my palm. This time it wasn't a call. It was a silent push notification from a hidden, motion-activated security camera I had discreetly installed in my private home office. I tapped the alert while keeping the police on the line. The live video feed loaded on my screen, and my blood instantly turned to ice. There in my locked, restricted study were Marcus and his wife, Chloe. They weren't mingling with the guests outside. They were violently prying open the wooden paneling behind my mahogany desk, desperately trying to crack my hidden fireproof safe. They weren't just after the car. "So what exactly were they looking for? Pull over to the shoulder, Mr. Arthur," the officer's voice echoed through my car's Bluetooth speakers. I complied, smoothly parking the Porsche on a secluded, dusty stretch of the coastal highway. A patrol cruiser's red and blue lights flashed ominously in my rearview mirror. When the officer approached my window, expecting to find a confused, erratic senior citizen, he instead found a perfectly calm executive holding a sleek leather dossier. I handed him the original title, the vehicle registration, and the insurance declaration. Every single document bore one name: mine. The officer reviewed the paperwork under his flashlight, his expression shifting from authoritative to deeply uncomfortable. "I apologize for the inconvenience, sir. Everything is in perfect order." He hesitated, lowering his voice as if sharing a grim, dangerous secret. "But you should know, your son didn't just report the car stolen. He filed a vulnerable adult distress report. He told dispatch you are suffering from aggressive early-onset Alzheimer's. He claimed you were having a severe hallucinatory episode, that you didn't know who you were, and that you posed a critical danger to yourself. The words hung in the warm evening air, cold and venomous. I thanked the officer, rolled up the window, and sat in the suffocating silence of the cabin. This wasn't a tantrum over a luxury car. This was a legal assassination. Marcus wasn't just an entitled brat trying to embarrass me in front of our friends. He was meticulously laying the groundwork for a conservatorship, a medical power of attorney. He was orchestrating a massive psychological gaslighting campaign to have me declared legally incompetent. Once that happened, he could effortlessly strip me of my rights, my fortune, and my life's work. I didn't drive back to the estate. Instead, I drove to the one place I knew was completely secure, my downtown corporate headquarters. The glass and steel building was dead silent on a Sunday evening. I bypassed the main elevators and used my private access code to enter my executive suite on the top floor. If Marcus was desperate enough to attempt a hostile takeover by having his own father committed, he was running out of time. Why the sudden rush? Why the drastic measures now? I booted up my private terminal. While Marcus held the title of vice president and controlled the daily operations, he never realized that the man who built the company's infrastructure from scratch retained ultimate, invisible backdoor access to every digital ledger. I bypassed his department's superficial, sanitized reports and dug directly into the raw financial data from the past 24 months. It took me less than 3 hours to find the bleeding. It had started small. A slight inflation in fuel costs here, a bloated maintenance contract there. But then the hemorrhaging became blatant and reckless. Over the last 2 years, Marcus had been systematically siphoning millions of dollars from our operational budget. He had created phantom vendors, fake logistics partners, billing us for cargo fleets that never existed. I tracked the routing numbers, peeling back the layers of digital obfuscation until I hit the rotting core of the conspiracy. The shell companies receiving the stolen funds were all registered in Delaware, and the primary beneficiary of those LLCs, Chloe, my sweet, supportive daughter-in-law, using her maiden name. They weren't just stealing, they were bleeding my legacy dry to fund a shadow empire. And with the annual independent financial audit scheduled for next month, they were trapped. They needed me institutionalized and stripped of my authority before the auditors found the missing millions. If I were declared mentally unfit, Marcus would take full control as my guardian, fire the auditors, and wipe the slate clean. I leaned back in my leather chair, the glow of the monitors casting long, sharp shadows across the dark office. Any normal father would have felt his heart shatter. A normal man would have wept at the sheer predatory cruelty of his own flesh and blood. But I didn't shed a single tear. I pulled out my phone and replayed the security footage of Marcus and Chloe frantically tearing my home office apart. They were looking for my estate planning documents. I paused the video on Marcus's desperate, sweat-drenched face. I knew exactly what his next move would be. He would need a doctor, a corrupt or easily manipulated psychiatrist, to sign a forged medical certificate declaring me legally insane. A slow, icy smile crept across my face in the darkness of the empty room. They wanted a helpless, confused old man. I was going to give them exactly what they asked for. But how do you destroy a trap? You step right into it, and you wait for the hunter to get close enough to snap his neck. To deceive a liar, you must feed them the exact lie they are starving for. When I returned to the estate on Monday morning, Marcus and Chloe were sitting in the kitchen, their faces a carefully rehearsed portrait of concern. They were ready for an explosive confrontation. They were ready for me to shout, to threaten, to demand answers about the police report and the safe. Instead, I gave them a masterpiece of vulnerability. I walked through the front door, my shoulders slightly hunched, my eyes darting around as if the familiar hallway suddenly felt foreign. I placed my keys in the refrigerator instead of the bowl on the counter. When Marcus cautiously asked me where I had been all night, I rubbed my temples, let out a shaky sigh, and whispered, I don't know, Marcus. Did I drive to the lake house? My head feels so foggy today. The subtle, triumphant glance Marcus shot at his wife was sickening. It was the look of a predator watching the poison finally take hold. By Tuesday, I was purposely forgetting the names of our oldest clients. By Wednesday, I left my laptop at home and asked Marcus to review contracts I claimed I couldn't comprehend. With every deliberate mistake I made, Marcus grew more arrogant, more reckless, and completely blind to the fact that I was weaving a noose around his neck. Behind the pathetic facade, I went to war. I didn't hire a flashy private investigator. I called Victor. Victor wasn't just my oldest friend and corporate attorney. He was a former federal financial investigator who dismantled white-collar criminals with the surgical precision of a butcher. We met in a noisy, unpretentious diner on the outskirts of the city, a place where men in bespoke suits never went. I slid the encrypted flash drive containing the raw financial data across the sticky formica table. Victor plugged it into his laptop. For 10 minutes, the only sound was the clinking of coffee cups around us. Finally, Victor took off his reading glasses, his expression hardening into cold steel. "This isn't just a corporate dispute, Arthur," Victor said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous gravel. "This is wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The shell companies Chloe registered, they cross state lines. That makes it a federal crime. If you hand this to the FBI, your son will serve serious time in a federal penitentiary." I looked out the diner window, watching the rain wash the grime off the pavement. "I don't just want him caught, Victor. I want him publicly dismantled. I want the illusion he built to shatter so completely that he can never put the pieces back together." We executed the counterplan that very night. While Marcus and Chloe were out celebrating their imminent victory at a Michelin-starred restaurant, I was busy installing military-grade, motion-activated micro-cameras. I swapped out the smoke detector in my home office with one containing a 4K lens and an ultra-sensitive audio bug. I placed another one behind the ventilation grill in Marcus's corporate office. But the physical traps were only the beginning. With Victor's forensic tech team, I planted a digital tripwire a honeypot deep inside the company's accounting software. The moment Marcus or Chloe attempted to delete or alter the fraudulent vendor files to cover their tracks before the audit, the system would silently freeze the original data, duplicate the entire hard drive, and beam it directly to Victor's encrypted offshore servers. The golden piece of evidence arrived on Thursday afternoon. I was sitting in my dark study, headphones on, watching the live feed from Marcus's office. He was pacing the floor, on speakerphone with a doctor. Eris, a corrupt, high-society psychiatrist notorious for writing whatever medical evaluations his wealthy clients paid for. "I need the paperwork ironclad, doctor," Marcus demanded, his voice trembling with greedy anticipation. "You need to explicitly state that my father is suffering from severe, irreversible dementia. Paranoia, complete loss of executive function. He cannot be allowed to manage a single dollar, let alone a multi-million-dollar logistics company." Chloe's voice chimed in, sharp and venomous. "Make sure the evaluation is backdated too before the audit notice. We need the medical power of attorney active by tomorrow." "It will cost you $50,000, the doctor replied. "Done," Marcus snapped. "Send the PDF." I hit the save button, capturing the 4K video and crystal-clear audio of premeditated malice. The puzzle was complete. Everything is now in place. Tomorrow morning at 10:00 a.m., Marcus has secretly convened an emergency meeting of the board of directors. He plans to present his forged medical documents, declare me mentally incompetent, and forcibly seize control of my life's work. He thinks I am a broken, senile old fool who won't even realize what room he is in. He thinks he is the apex predator closing in for the kill. He has absolutely no idea that the doors of the cage have already locked behind him. At exactly 9:55 a.m., the glass-walled boardroom on the 50th floor was suffocatingly quiet. I stood in the adjoining shadows of the executive lounge, watching through the privacy blinds. Marcus was sitting at the head of the long mahogany table, my chair. Chloe sat close to his right, wearing a somber black dress, flawlessly playing the role of the grieving, supportive wife. The board of directors and senior shareholders were seated around them, looking tense and uncomfortable. Marcus stood up. He lowered his head, pinched the bridge of his nose, and let out a perfectly rehearsed sigh. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming on such short notice. This is undoubtedly the hardest day of my life." He slid a pristine white folder onto the center of the table. "As you all know, my father built this company. He is a titan. But the human mind is fragile. Over the past few months, his cognitive decline has become impossible to ignore. Enclosed is a medical evaluation from Dr. Eris confirming severe early-onset dementia. For the sake of the company, and for his own safety, I must invoke my power of attorney and step in as acting CEO." A murmur of sympathy rippled through the room. Chloe reached out and gently squeezed his hand. It was a beautiful, tragic performance. I checked my watch. 10:00 a.m. I pushed open the heavy oak doors. They didn't just creak, they slammed against the walls like a thunderclap. The murmurs instantly died. Every head snapped toward the entrance. I didn't shuffle in like a confused, broken elder. I strode in wearing a bespoke charcoal suit, my posture as straight as a steel beam, my eyes locked directly onto my son. The air in the room seemed to freeze. "A brilliant speech, Marcus," I said, my voice echoing off the glass walls, calm, resonant, and entirely lethal. "But you forgot one minor detail. You don't have the authority to call this meeting, and you certainly don't have the authority to sit in my chair." Marcus turned ghostly pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Chloe's hand snapped away from his as if he were suddenly on fire. "Dad," Marcus stammered, his eyes darting frantically toward the bewildered shareholders. You shouldn't be here. You're not well. Your paranoia is acting up. Please, let me take you home." "Sit down," I commanded. It wasn't a request. It was the voice of a man who had commanded thousands of employees for 4 decades. Marcus collapsed back into the chair as if his strings had been brutally cut. I walked to the head of the table, pulling a small silver remote from my breast pocket. "My son claims I am losing my mind, that I am unfit to manage the finances of this corporation. Let's test his theory, shall we?" I pressed the button. The massive projector screen behind Marcus rolled down, plunging the room into cinematic darkness. The screen flared to life, not with quarterly projections, but with bank statements. High-definition, irrefutable offshore banking ledgers. Over the last 24 months, precisely $4.2 million has been embezzled from our logistics budget. I narrated smoothly, pacing behind Marcus like a shark circling a bleeding diver. The funds were routed through phantom vendors and funneled into 3 Delaware shell companies. I clicked the remote. Chloe's maiden name, driver's license, and signature appeared on the screen in massive, glaring letters. Several board members gasped. Chloe let out a choked sob, pressing her trembling hands over her mouth. "This is a lie," Marcus shouted, his voice cracking with sheer, unfiltered panic. He leaped to his feet. "He's paranoid. This is exactly what the doctor's report says. He's fabricating these documents, am I?" I whispered. I pressed the remote one final time. The bank statements vanished, replaced by the crisp 4K video I had recorded yesterday. Marcus's own voice blasted through the boardroom speakers. "I need the paperwork ironclad, doctor. You need to explicitly state that my father is suffering from severe, irreversible dementia. It will cost you $50,000. Done." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a man's entire universe vaporizing in real time. The shareholders stared at Marcus with unadulterated disgust. Marcus looked up at me, his eyes wide, hyperventilating. The arrogance was entirely gone, replaced by the naked, shivering terror of a boy who had finally been caught. "Dad, please." It was a lapse in judgment. "I can explain. We can fix this. I am your heir." I leaned down, resting my hands on the leather back of his chair, speaking softly into his ear. "You were my heir, Marcus. But you see, I had a brief moment of clarity this morning. I had Victor restructure my entire estate. As of 8:00 a.m. today, you are completely disinherited. And this company? It now belongs to an employee ownership trust. The mechanics, the drivers, the people who actually work for a living, they own the empire now. You own absolutely nothing." Marcus began to weep. Genuine, pathetic tears. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. "And you tried to steal the only thing I had left, my dignity." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the rhythmic strobing of red and blue lights suddenly reflected against the glass. The wail of sirens echoed from the street below. The boardroom doors opened again. Victor stood there, holding a thick leather briefcase, flanked by 2 federal agents in dark windbreakers. Marcus looked at the agents, then up at me, his face a mask of total devastation. "Dad, please," he begged, his voice barely a whisper. "Don't do this to me." I straightened my tie, looked down at the architect of his own ruin, and delivered my final verdict. "Live as if you never had a father." I stood by the glass window and watched the federal agents escort Marcus out of the building. There was no triumph in my heart, only the cold, heavy realization of a bitter truth. I spent my life trying to shield my son from the struggles I endured, never realizing that adversity is the very forge where character is made. By giving him everything, I left him with nothing. Love should be generous, but it must be wise. Dignity and respect are not birthrights. They are privileges that must be earned with your own 2 hands. Thank you for listening to my story. If this dark lesson on betrayal and accountability resonated with you, please hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more psychological thrillers. Until next time, guard your legacy. And remember, sometimes the hardest act of love is letting someone fall.